Good afternoon, everybody. Josh Bain, Midwest Director with the Center for Energy Education. We're going to get things kicked off here in about 1 minute. Going to give people about one more minute here to join. Looks like we got a few people jumping in now, and then we'll get started. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate everyone's time today for our fifth installment of our Planners webinar series. I see a lot of familiar names here on our attendee list, so appreciate everyone joining. Today we're going to be going over agrivoltaics and vegetation management, dual land use. We have two amazing speakers, Brian Komnick from Jack Solar Garden and the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center, and then we have David Neber, who's a farmer from Kentucky. So very excited for this. We're going to have Byron presenting first. So he lives on his family farm in Boulder County, Colorado. He founded Jack's Solar Garden, our nation's premier site for agrivoltaics, welcoming thousands of visitors each year. He also serves as the director of the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center, where he helps educate others at the intersection of renewable energy and sustainable agriculture. His journey has been, as he would say, a long and winding one, spanning volunteerism, academia, government service, consulting, business ownership, nonprofit leadership, all centered around two of the most essential foundations of any society: bettering people's lives and caring for our natural resources. He often reminds us that when you boil down any economy to its core, it comes down to two things: people and the resources they manage. His work reflects that belief, strengthening human capacity while revitalizing the land we depend on. So please join me in welcoming Byron, who is also a Boulder County Plan Commissioner, a SOCA Fellow, and National Leader in Agrivoltaics Innovation. Thank you, Byron.
That was a fun introduction. Thanks. Hi, folks. I'm going to get to sharing my screen here. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Does that come up? Because I can't see anybody now since I went the nuclear option. Great. All right. Yeah, my name is Byron Komnick, owner and manager of Jack Solar Garden, and I run our small nonprofit, the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center, so that we can teach people about agrivoltaics. I think when we were first starting Jack Solar Garden back in 2020, we knew we were doing something different than anybody else. So we needed to figure out how could we go about educating folks on this to see that it was an option to integrate agriculture within a solar array, and started up the nonprofit at the same time. So both organizations are coming up on 5 years. We started producing power at Jack Solar Garden on November 1st of 2020. Yeah, 5 years of production. It's a community solar garden, so we sell electricity to a variety of different clients, but we're not here to talk about the electricity side of things, but it's important. So I always like to show how we first got installed, and then we get into the agriculture, because you can't do agrivoltaics without the solar component. So first off, whenever you have a site, you're going to get a bunch of steel I-beams put in the ground. So we had a pile driver here putting in over 2,400 steel I-beams on my family's farm, located just south of Longmont, Colorado, on 24 acres. But this is a 8-acre parcel where 4 acres of solar panels were going in. 3,276 panels put in at a couple different heights, so that we could work with researchers to learn more about how the different heights, the different microclimates created by our single axis tracking system would impact vegetation, people, and livestock. And then hopefully this comes through a little bit. Teams is a little squirrely at times, but this shows panels tracking east to west throughout the course of the day. Nowhere gets full sun, nowhere gets full shade. I think a lot of people don't think that vegetation grows in the shade, and well, that's just not true. Plenty of people have been out into forests where there's undergrowth, or you might have like a little shady spot of your yard that something still grows. Shade is important, especially in areas where it's hot and dry, like here in Colorado. But to get growing on a variety of different crops, we had to prep the land. It was a hay field to begin with, so use these tractors to grade or not grade to till the land after installation was complete, so that we could create crop beds and work with a nonprofit farming organization called Sprout City Farms that hired a number of farm labor to come out into our farm over the past 5 seasons to grow a variety of crops using drip tape out on our field that's connected to a local fire hydrant. And they've grown a lot of different types of crops. I think this year alone, they've grown probably upwards of 15,000 pounds of food. The season's not fully over yet, but we're nearing the end of it here in Colorado. But any type of market garden vegetable that you can think of, they've grown in. Here's pictured some tomatillos, carrots, tomatoes, beans. There's been eggplant and cabbage, radishes, turnips, beautiful bell peppers, lots of onions of various types. We even had okra growing out underneath the panels. Always fun to see how different crops, and not the different type of crop, but the different varietal. I think we all know like there's a bajillion different types of potatoes and types of corn and peppers and all that. So it's interesting to trial each of these different types of each of these varieties of a crop to figure out where within a solar array it does well, depending on the microclimate that's in. But here's hopefully a video that folks can see. Good to know my sound's not working on this, but all you'd hear is my footsteps, essentially. You can see we got corn growing down the middle of the row. That was sweet corn. This was from last season. There's some cabbage growing on either side of the corn on the drip edges. Just different ways that you can plant various types of crops in the solar array. We even have a small raspberry patch in the solar array over the past handful of years, and this next season in 2026, we're actually ending the vegetable production and we're turning fully towards berry production and herb production. So one of the reasons why we decided to move towards that direction was here's raspberries growing underneath the panels happily. And then this next image showcases how when a soft freeze comes through in the early fall, what happens? We have a lot of raspberries outside the solar array that go dormant when a soft freeze comes through, but the panels create a microclimate that helps to stave off that soft frost at night. So these two pictures were taken like 2 minutes apart from each other as me walking across the field to one spot to another. And this was maybe 3 days after a soft frost came through, completely knocking out berry production outside the solar array while still having bees and new flowers on the raspberry bushes growing. So it extended our berry patch season by about a month that year. Here you can see how we have different microclimates that are created in the solar array. As I was alluding to, you have different varieties that prefer different places, where the east edge of the solar panel has a west bed that gets morning sun. The middle bed gets about after midday sun, and then our east bed, which is at the west drip edge of the solar panels, gets afternoon sunlight. We find that the two outer beds get about 50% of daily sunlight, while the middle bed gets close to 70%. That also means the two outer beds get 50% of daily shade, and the middle bed gets 30% of daily shade. So things do grow in the shade, especially where people move to Colorado because it's really sunny. We find that the drip edges allow for more moisture to go into the soil, especially in the latter part of the summertime when we have our afternoon rainstorms in Colorado. We get a deluge of water dropping off of the panels when they're facing to the west that dumps on our east bed, that helps bolster the amount of moisture that's in the ground there, while the east edge of the solar panels we find dumps off more snow, during the winter time, so that in the early spring that west bed gets a bumper crop, or not a full bumper crop. Like the soil moisture is much higher in that side. So then when the roots are starting to grow, when they're sucking in water, they get growing. They have extra capacity for growing larger. We're also showcasing a variety of different types of livestock. What else is possible? I think the picture on the right-hand side there of sheep in a solar array is a pretty known fact within the solar industry, that you can have various types of sheep. I know a number of folks prefer not to have wool sheep like what I have here. They prefer to have hair sheep because they're afraid that wool will get caught in different gears or something, which I find strange. Like when I grab onto my wool sheep and I'm trying to wrestle them to the ground, sometimes I come away with a fistful of wool, and it's like hair, it'll just get pulled out too. Anyways, digression. On the left-hand side, you'll see some chickens out underneath the panels. We had a chicken farmer working with us for a few months this season who was grazing chickens out underneath the panels. Chickens, turkeys, ducks, and geese, they're all kind of forest creatures. They all want to have shade. They don't like to be in full sun, because when they're in full sun, then they're exposed to predators. It's easier for a hawk or an eagle to see a little bit of a shadow on the ground and then swoop down and get them. So they're always trying to stay in the shade as much as possible. Notice if you have chickens, if you ever watch them, they're going to be darting out into the sun and back into shade for the majority of the day. So opportunities for having both of these animals out within a solar array, creating agribusinesses for people, but also cows. We've had cows come out to visit us every year for the past handful of years, where we have on the cows pictured here are red Angus beef cows. We can have them out in the solar array. It's really, really important to have very safe wire management so that the animals aren't able to access wires. It's possible to do. It takes a little bit of regulation to get that done, but it's 100% possible to keep them away from wires. And then oftentimes we get people telling us that cows are just too big, that they can knock over steel I-beams, or that they're 6 foot tall or something. And most of that is nonsense. Beef cattle are grown so that they are shorter. You don't need a leggy cow when you're harvesting the meat from it. You want to have short, stocky cows, and that's what all beef cattle are bred to be. The cows now pictured are dairy cows, and they will be a little bit taller because they are bred so that you can actually get underneath the animal and work their teats. So there's a few pictures of cows there hanging out. When it's a hot day, you could imagine that the animals are going to be in the shade. If it's a cool day, they'll probably go out into the sun. And then if it's a snowy day, they're probably going to be directly underneath the panels, because they probably don't want to get wet. They don't need that. They can have extra disease from that. So we find that it's fascinating to have cattle in a solar array. People love seeing it. And our Colorado is a cattle state. Our country is basically a cattle country. Beef is on the menu on a regular basis. Lamb, not so much. Wonderful to see more lamb coming out there, but it's typically more expensive too. Also, I think we have about 100 million cows in our country, and where it's closer to 5 million sheep. Oftentimes we have questions around the animals interacting with the steel I-beams, and this is a little video of a cow going to town, scratching its neck on the steel I-beams there. And it's steel. It's the same stuff that we use to build skyscrapers, right? They're embedded. The steel I-beams are embedded 7 to 9 feet in the ground on my property. A cow that weighs 1,200 pounds or less, I mean, just scratching on it, rubbing on it, they're not going to do anything to that steel I-beam. Again, it would be more the wires that I'm concerned about. The panels is a question of whether or not the animals would be able to damage the solar panels, but I can leave that one for questions to get more into. I wanted to share that our nonprofit, the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center, spends a lot of time trying to support local government. We just had a workshop out here on the farm last week which are the three pictures there to the left-hand side, where we had 23, 24 different officials from 10 different counties, which included 3 different county commissioners, all getting a chance to spend 2 days on the farm learning more about agrivoltaics. And we'd bring out folks from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the Nature Conservancy, different land trusts. The picture here is in the middle with the cowboy hat is Cameron of Light Root Farm. That's a dairy near Boulder. And then the other fellow that's grinning there, Jacob Lindus of the Nature Conservancy, getting a chance to see one of the cows with horns up close within our solar array, understanding that they are capable of being within the solar array. It just takes some upfront planning for it. So not only do we engage county officials on site and through online presentations like this one, but we've also created a few different documents that can help support folks. One is our county land use regulations for solar energy development in Colorado. That was in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, published as a technical report with them back in 2024, looking at land use code regulations across Colorado, across all 64 counties in Colorado, as to how they allow for solar energy deployment on farmland. And if you guessed that every county was different than the one next to it, you're absolutely right. Every single county had slightly different definitions, slightly different ways of regulating solar, whether it's by megawatts or whether it's by acres, or if it's for commercial or industrial or residential usage. They had different setbacks, different heights, all these different things. So once we did that analysis and saw just how much of a mosaic it was across Colorado as to all the different regulations that were out there, we spent the next year and a half working on developing a land use code guidance for counties in Colorado to deploy agrivoltaics if that's what they wanted. So on our website, you'd be able to, there's the website link. You can't click it right now, but if you want to take a screenshot, you can save that for later and go look at the land use code guidance. But what we did here was we looked at different county guidance from across Colorado and pulled out specific language from existing county codes that matched what we were interested in with agrivoltaics. We mixed and matched a lot of different codes to create this land use code guidance, and then we even found some that there weren't any codes for some of the things that we're interested in. So I thought I would share a number of the things that weren't out there that we were interested in showcasing. So if you're considering involving agrivoltaics within your land use code, these next slides are for you. First off, we all know definitions are extremely important. Here is our definition of an agrivoltaic system that is meant for county planning and permitting, because there's state level ones that might be more interested in incentives. County level definitions should be more towards how a structure is built versus how it is long-term operated. There in the underline is where we're really focusing in on the planning, designing, and building side of it. We also, within this land use code guidance, look at something called conservation solar, which is also known as ecovoltaics. We just prefer conservation solar in it. That really focuses on how can we co-prioritize our wildlife, our natural resource preservation with the development of solar arrays. So these were two main areas that we focused on in this land use code guidance. And to get going on it, here's some agrivoltaic design standards that we have within this. One is that we require within this land use code guidance an agrivoltaic development plan that focuses on mainly 3 main ideas. One is accessibility. Accessibility involves this right now, the panel height, where how do you have these different types of animals or machinery or different heights of crops existing within a solar array? And if the panel height is too low, then you're really limited on what types of crops or animals you can have. The higher it is, the more useful it will be, depending on what your interests are. Is there a cost implication to it? 100%. So it should be thought of as how can you balance the need for higher or lower panels with what a developer can afford. Two, within our accessibility framework, is looking at removing vehicular obstructions, or even imagine a wheelbarrow going through. So some sites are built where you have a drive line that goes east-west, like on the right picture there, and on the left-hand side, you have panels that are able to rotate going or with the torque tubes directly underneath the panels, being able to allow for vehicles to move throughout the solar array unimpeded, which is important. Next, we get into wire management. I think I already mentioned that with the cows. Wire management is incredibly important. Figuring out how to keep wires high and tight, flush up against any structures, away from any hands, hooves, horns, hose, anything along those lines. You do not want to have any interaction with the wire. So if a site is going to be for agrivoltaics, having extra stress on wire management is going to make it safe for people, livestock, machinery, and the solar array itself. So we have some instructions within this land use code guidance as to how one can do this, how one can regulate it at the county level. Wrong direction. Next, we look towards our third bucket of let's not degrade the ground. If you grade a site, you're compacting it down so that cars can speed on it up to 50 miles an hour. And if you put soil to the side and you're going to just sprinkle the dust back on, saying that you've saved the topsoil and you're sprinkling it back, I think for the most part within the ag community, that's kind of considered cute. That's not quite how it works. When you have a hard pack layer and then a hard pack layer that's over 300 psi, and then you put back on top of it 1 or 2 inches of soil, any roots that you try to grow out there thereafter can only grow in those top couple inches, and that's not sufficient for perennial habitats, not sufficient for any annual vegetables either. So you really need to be concerned about not grading a site, not destroying it, limiting compaction as much as possible, and that oftentimes comes down to not having repetitive movements over the same spot of a field. Having an agricultural implementation plan, I think, would be useful for figuring out how to have water access and managing weeds over time, because any disturbance to a land brings up noxious weeds. And looking towards how does a solar developer actually have a lease agreement with the landowner to build it? Does it allow for agriculture or does it not? On the conservation solar side, as I wrap up here, I wanted to point out that you can do this co-prioritization of a solar array with ecosystem services. I even recently learned about a solar array here in Colorado where elk every year move through that solar array because it's not well fenced. I've seen great horned owls underneath my panels. I've seen coyotes and bobcat and bear prints underneath and around my solar panels. Wildlife can exist within solar arrays. It's figuring out how to design solar arrays so that they can work together if that is of interest, and concentrating on working with a local conservation organization is a really useful step to do so. Having wildlife protection plans really involves, in my opinion, there's the picture of the great horned owl underneath my panels, really involves wire management. Having good, safe wire management avoids having any animal interaction with solar arrays. And then coming up with figuring out how to design solar arrays using best management practices, as was shown within the agrivoltaics section of our land use code guidance, can help out with figuring out how well can we manage this site so that we don't disturb any wildlife or specific vegetation that we're trying to preserve. Anyhow, the regulations are out there. Again, here's the website. If you're interested, screenshot that. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Byron. We are going to get transferred over to David Neville now. And just as a quick FYI, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to put them in the Q&A portion of the PowerPoint. Both Byron and David will be here to answer questions at the end, we're going to save 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So our next speaker is David, the owner and operator of Capstone Farms, located in Shelby and Henry counties, Kentucky. It's 358 acres, and it's a model of both tradition and innovation, raising cattle, goats, sheep, chicken for eggs, while also incorporating a bunch of other advanced types of agriculture system. They produce fresh, healthy food for institutional markets, including K-12 schools, universities, hospitals. David is an Army veteran and a graduate of Kentucky State University. So look forward to hearing from David. Please join me in welcoming him now to this portion of the webinar.
Well, thank you, Joshua. Appreciate y'all having me on this today. Kudos to Byron and all his good work. We come at it from a little different standpoint in terms of what we're doing now, what our plans are, what our farm looks like now, what our plans are for the farm. So I grew up in the tobacco industry and was around dairies and those more conventional ag products in Kentucky. And at one time, we were more than $1 billion in tobacco here in Kentucky, paid for a lot of school clothes and rural churches and that sort of thing. And that's about done. Tobacco is only on a few or larger scale farms. So if you want a farm, you got to think about it a little differently, right? So we do some conventional stuff with cattle and goats and chickens, but I'll put what we're doing now and planning for in the future in sort of the three categories. One is conventional farming. We still have cows and calves. I'm getting ready to wean some calves here next week, as a matter of fact. We have goats that we lease out for browsing. I'm taking some goats up to Farmington, a historic plantation in Jefferson County, sometime in the next couple of days. And then my wife has chickens, and if y'all don't know, country eggs are just a little better than store-bought eggs, as we say. We want to do something a little different to adapt to our resources. And I come from a background in corporate sales and marketing, white tie, white shirt, tie, no beard, no hat for a bunch of years. And what that gave me the ability to do is understand how businesses work, purchase, etc., how our corporations work. And so, for instance, we concentrate a lot on K-12 schools and foods and farm to school kind of stuff. And my schools were like, yeah, we need beef, but we need other things as well. So we created a healthier version of a hot dog for school lunch programs. And then, and there'd be questions about, well, how can it be healthier? It is a hot dog, but some of the really cheap hot dogs were like 35 grams of carbs, a bunch of sugar, no protein. And ours has a couple of grams of carbs and lots of protein. So in looking at that and building relationships, and it's all about relationships, I think whatever you're doing, and I'm going to address that issue with large scale solar in just a second. But building relationships, my food service directors say, hey, we need other things. We're really having a supply issue with fresh produce. And so a little more than a year ago now, we sold our first lettuce in late November last year. We put together some hydroponics and aquaponics. So the conventional side with the cows and the goats, we have some aquaponics and hydroponics specifically to grow primarily lettuce for school programs. And then we said, what else can we do? And so there were some larger scale utility solar companies said, hey, can you use your goats that heard about our browsing? Can you use your goats to help with vegetation management? And I had to say no because the goats would be doing river dances on your panels and chewing all the wires. But we could look at sheep. And so to make my thing work on my farm with the hydroponics, of course, it was going to require a lot of energy. We looked at solar. And long story short, we put in solar enough to power our systems. And we're even adding some systems now that we hope to take advantage of the solar. So we were north of $2,000 a month on our electric bill, and it was going to be increasing. We put the solar in. The last three electric bills were $26, $28, and $33. really for service fees, not even for the electric. So we were very pleased with that. Our next step was we're going to put some sheep in there. So we have a half dozen yearling ewes grazing now under that under those panels, and they're working really good. They went in and cleaned. It was kind of funny. They went in and cleaned a bunch of brush out underneath the panels, like making their bed first, and then attacked the rest of the vegetation. But they've done a tremendous job doing that, right? And so that third piece, so conventional farming, hydroponics, and all that solar and sheep stuff. The third piece says I have a little place on my farm. Imagine a rectangle, a large rectangle, and two long ovals in that rectangle, one with panels and sheep, one with panels and plants. And then the electric from those solar panels will power a high tunnel, uh, fans and lights and that sort of thing, and also power a barn that we use for working cattle and other animals, right? And so that is what I call a showcase of opportunities, right? So some farmers, and a lot of them way smarter than me, can read it, can hear it, but if they ain't seeing it, they ain't believing it. So part of what I'm doing is in the farm community to say, hey, this works. And all those myths out there, like you're going to kill all the birds and the bees and poison your ground and nothing will grow and you can't do agriculture. That's a demonstration site specifically for those issues, right? So in one corner of the uh, rectangle, we'll have a little pollinator habitat. We'll have some beehives and take honey out of those hives and serve to folks who come visit us. Right? We're an open book. We share our successes and our failures. We want people to come see us. On the hydroponics side, we sort of have three buckets. One is research or on-farm research, not the kind of research that universities do, get $800,000 grant, do the research, write a paper, everybody pats themselves on the back. But what impact does that have on their constituents? And in this case, it would be on me as a farmer. Are they really doing anything to help the farmer put money in their pocket and stuff? So we are doing some both greenhouse work and also some shipping container hydroponics. It's got to work on the farm. If it don't work, we're going fishing. The second piece to that is it's got to be profitable. And a lot of the larger university research projects, they don't really care about, I don't know if they don't care, but they really don't prove out any profit motive. And if you're going to stay in business as a farm, you got to make a little money, right? And then that third piece is what I call showcase of opportunities. Have folks out, whether that be a high school class, other farmers, university folks, local government officials, anybody that wants to come see what we're doing and understand that if they're doing it, if I'm doing it, if David Neville's doing it, anybody can do it, right? So it's one of those kinds of things. And we ain't perfect and we ain't pretty, but it just flat works. So as an example of that, we got like 5 different hydroponics, aquaponic stuff in our greenhouse, and one of that is float beds. And so we can raise 4,608 heads of lettuce at one time in those float beds. It's a pretty cool sight. So when somebody comes, and we use a refurbished old tobacco greenhouse. So what we hope is folks walk in the greenhouse, hey, that used to be used for tobacco. You ain't doing tobacco no more. What are you going to do? Well, maybe grow some produce for schools, because schools in Kentucky and elsewhere really purchase more food products than any other entity in almost any county, right? So there's a big opportunity. Plus, you get fresh food to the students. And just a quick note on that, we were working with Trimble County and adjacent county, Trimble County schools. And the lady ran the cafeteria there, says, when you first brought this stuff in, it wasn't iceberg lettuce. Students backed up a little bit, said, I don't know about that. She said, well, you don't have to eat it, but you got to try it. They tried it, and now they say, Miss Wilson, can we have some more of that good lettuce? And then they understand it's from a local farmer, and then they understand it's grown using electric from solar, and then they understand we have sheep under that solar. The story is tremendous. And it's not because of me, it's because of the story and what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're making it work on farm. So we hope to continue doing the conventional stuff. Also calves a couple months ago, higher than I'd ever sold them. So we're staying in the cattle business. As I said, we're doing goat browsing. We're going to continue doing that. But this other part is really giving opportunities for, I think, a lot of folks, not only those folks that grew tobacco, because they were growing transplants in greenhouses on float beds, but other opportunities as well to do shipping container hydroponics. If it's 20 degrees outside, it can be 65 inside, 95, 65 inside. And the footprint of those things are 8 by 40, so, 320 feet. And they produce a lot of stuff. So part of what this whole conversation with me is about is, hey, we're not killing all the birds and the bees, right? It works. It ain't gonna shock you if you look at it. It ain't gonna, destroy wildlife. We have a hunter on our farm, not next to the solar, obviously, but harvested one of the biggest bucks he's ever seen in his life, right? And it's right there on the farm where the solar is. So that kind of tells the story as well. So with all of that said, I've been approached by some utility scale solar folks. I think the biggest challenge there, and I'm never going to tell somebody how to do their business, but they came and said, "Hey, can you help us?" Not only they offered to lease my ground, but also, can you help us within the community, right? And so I'll take an example of one county in Kentucky. I won't mention the county, but one county in Kentucky. The solar folks said, "Can you help us with this?" And I said, "Yeah, but you got to remember that folks in Kentucky, just because you're carrying money bags in, it don't really work. You got to build that relationship first. I talked about that before. You got to build that relationship." So we weren't able to convince them that the relationship part in the community was that important. So they had a meeting. They invited me down there, the zoning planning commission, and it happened to be in a Baptist church. It was a big church. There was probably 300 people there. It was loaded up. And the proponents of solar was the solar company, pretty much it. Everybody else is in opposition because they didn't understand. They had not been educated that there was no relationships built, right? And so I suggested that folks don't even go in. Yeah, but we got to tell our piece. Well, we went in. There were people talking about all the myths around solar, right? And part of that was they just need to be educated. And then a guy got up and sang some hymns in opposition to solar, and it was over. It was over. And of course the planning and zoning committee said no. So this company spent lots of money. They're still down there, still not engaged in the community, and it's still not working, right? So I would encourage folks in your local areas to get engaged in the community. And it's the chicken or egg thing, right? Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's you build the relationships first. And so you have some advocates within the community. You're not just carrying money bags in, but you have advocates to say, what are the advantages of solar and what are the negative myths around it that are just not so, right? And so that's part of what we're doing both in our hydroponic deal, which is up and going already, and part of our mini solar farm, I'll call it. So we can point out directly. And like I said, not only farmers, but other folks too. Sometimes you can talk and talk and talk, but they got to see it, right? Is it really working? Can you really do this thing? Can you really do agriculture and solar together? And Byron was talking about cattle. And I have cattle, but I don't plan on putting them under solar yet. But over at Morehead State University in the eastern part of the state, they put in a solar array to power up a barn, and they built it so that pre-planting that he had talked about, they built it so that it was the panels were high enough and the poles stout enough to have their bull barn right next to it, and bulls and cows running under the solar, and it worked. They didn't knock the panels down. They scratched a lot, but they didn't knock the panels down. And of course, we have sheep, and the sheep, knock on wood, they haven't bothered. I cannot see a thing that they bothered, whether it be wiring or the panels themselves or any other thing. They go in there under the shade, and they're really loving it. And then we do some horticulture outside of our hydroponics. and we have read some studies about, hey, what are plants doing under solar? And I think maybe New Mexico State University, a couple of universities out west suggested that plants can have 30% more productivity and 40% less use of water. So if a developer is in a place where water scarcity is a major concern, and uh, folks view the solar in agriculture as a zero-sum game, hey, we either do solar, no ag, or ag and no solar. Maybe this is the thing that gets some conversation started. Maybe do a pilot scale. And I know most developers want to make best use of their money, go in, and they got 200 acres, they want to build it out and get the power going and go. But sometimes I think we need to have a little patience in terms of developing relationships and let folks see what it is. Now, there's some bad examples of that on I-64 going east here in Kentucky. There's a solar array, and it's covered in gravel. All the ground is covered in gravel. And I'm not saying anything about the company that did that, but the consumer, as they drive by, say, see, I told you that solar was no good. Look at that. You'll never have farm ground there again. Versus seeing sheep out grazing, it's really good PR. Seeing plants, really good PR. Seeing pollinator habitats and bees and eating honey on a hot biscuit, that's really, but you got to think a little further than how are we going to get this thing installed, right? The educational piece, I think, is missing in a lot of cases. What is solar? What's not solar? Can we have a workshop on what solar looks like prior to saying, all right, we leased this piece of ground, we're building it, right? Because by and large, almost every one solar deal in Kentucky's had major pushback, except those folks over in Eastern Kentucky. They're building some solar on abandoned mine land and taking advantage of some opportunities over there, and actually are going to do some agriculture along with those. So, with that said, hopefully you'll kind of get a picture of, I have the vision of what large scale solar wants to do, but also am engaged in the community, and then I have a personal stake in my own solar, if that makes sense. So, well, we appreciate y'all listening. And of course, if you have any questions, or if anybody would like to come visit and see what we're doing right there in Henry County, Kentucky, I have a little bit of a specialty: cast iron peach cobbler made out of local peaches. How about that?
Well, thank you, David, for the presentation, and I, for one, am looking forward to the peach cobbler being just in a neighboring state, so I have no excuses. So really appreciate Byron and David's time. We do have a couple questions here that have already come through, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A here, and I'll read them out loud. But the first question is for Byron, and it's in the southeastern part of the country, specifically North Carolina. Some farmers, and I'll even attest to this out in the Midwest, believe that solar panels are unsafe for agriculture use, that they leach chemicals into the ground, make the land underneath unusable, among other myths. Do you encounter this scale of misinformation where you're at, and how do you recommend addressing that narrative?
Yeah, we hear that a lot. And yeah, it's misinformation as far as I know. I don't think there's been any studies to show that it does leach. And oddly, I don't think there's been studies that show that it doesn't. I think I was just hearing about from my team that I'll have to look back up, but I could find out what university is planning to do such tests. We've been growing food underneath our solar panels for 5 seasons now. I've been eating it every year. I don't have like weird growths on my face or anything like that. It's hard to really tell someone that it's like show them that doesn't happen, because you're talking about little minerals that are in the soil. And then if I want to do those, if I want to go out and do soil testing, Am I going to do that at every single one of my 3,276 panels, or am I just going to do one? If I just do one, then they're like, well, what about those ones? And it's also very expensive to do those types of tests. For the most part, what I try to tell folks is, look, if a solar company is building a solar panel so it leaches out chemicals, and that means more than likely that panel is becoming less efficient rather rapidly, they're not going to stay in business. Those companies are going to go out of business if the solar panels are being sold to a solar developer that's trying to make money off of electricity, and now they're not making electricity off of those panels. Company's not going to exist. So that's one way to look at it.
Okay, and we have a question for both of you. Is there anything that a local government can do, a county government can do to encourage developers to invest in agrivoltaics if they're looking to locate in the county? And maybe we can touch on a little bit about the importance of having, a willing landowner or a willing developer, but what can a county do to encourage that willingness from a developer?
David, you go ahead.
Sure. I think it goes back, and not to overemphasize this point, please, but it goes back to those relationships that you're building, right? If you just come in and knock on the county judge's door and say, hey, help us encourage folks to do solar, right? That's probably not going to get you very far. But if you come in, take a look at the needs of the community and say there's a need for a remodel on their softball field, right? And the county judge really wants to stick a feather in their cap. It's not bribing. I'm not talking about any underhanded stuff, but help out the community first. And then you get the local officials on board, knowing that there are going to be some tax revenue coming in. There's going to be some community help. So I would kind of look at it like that, especially in those rural communities. The politician doesn't fix the potholes. They're getting a lot of pressure. Can they do something that offsets that public pressure, right? And do something legit. I'm talking about nothing underhanded. I think that'd go a long way with county officials.
If my stance goes, I fully appreciate David's point on you got to use those soft tactics and pushing developers to do so. It makes sense. If you're a county official, that's not an elected official, you're probably thinking about, well, how can you codify those things to make it more of a fair playing field for folks? Within our land use code guidance that is free, it's on our website. I put up the link for it. We do have a page all about the different types of incentives, if that is the direction folks want to go, thinking about where can solar be placed. You can maybe identify different commercial industrial areas that traditional solar, not agrivoltaics, can be placed. And then if it's going to be on farmland, then it has to be agrivoltaics. That is one way to incentivize people being able to have an agrivoltaic project, because if you can't build a project without it being agrivoltaic, then kind of have an incentive right there from the get-go. If you are, there are different tax bases that one can deal with, but then you're working across offices within a county, like your assessor's office and planning department office, which they don't always collaborate. And sometimes the assessor's office is an elected official, so you can't always figure that that's going to be a long-term solution. Having it within the code, you could say, at this county workshop we had last week, we had county officials hypothesizing whether or not you could just say, hey, all applications for solar developments are due by December 31st of every year. And if you aren't in it by December 31st of that year, you now have to wait until the next December 31st. And then you say, I am going to prioritize which applications get reviewed and in what order. And you're going to start off with those that have a large amount of land stewardship involved with the planning process and how they're designing it, can get looked at first and have priority over the others. And maybe you say that you're only going to allow for 100 acres or 1,000 acres or however much development in the county on an annual basis, followed by review. And so then that starts to weed out like what applications, and then you can kind of compare the applications a bit as to how you choose to start the approval process with them. So those are a few different things, but again, take a look at our land use code guidance document. Hopefully that'll be of help.
Thank you. And I just have a couple more questions here. Byron, this one's specifically geared towards you. How high do panels need to be off the ground for dairy cows? What do you know what the total height would be of, an average utility scale sized panel? I know a lot of times in local ordinances, the total height of a panel can be part of a discussion on that.
Damn good question. There's no right answer. If anybody tells you that there is one specific answer, it's not true. That has not been figured out as of yet. My height, typically within the solar industry, you're talking about the lowest edge of the panel, and that's where you're going to concentrate your efforts, because then everything else falls in line thereafter. How tall the torque tubes are, the steel I-beams, and all that jazz. The area where I put cows underneath the panels, the leading edge gets down to 5'6", and I typically only allow the cows in that section when the panels are above 5'9". And I also exclude them from where there's wire interactions. That is mainly for simply showcasing that they're available there. Now, there are other sites around the country that have put cows in solar arrays. One of the coolest I've heard about is some folks called the Huas. That's a cattle ranching family just east of us here in the plains of Colorado. They actually took 40 or 50 yearlings down to a site in Louisiana where there's a 10 megawatt site, so over 40 acres, with the leading edge being only 2 feet off the ground. And they released them. And yearlings are about 400, 600 pounds a piece, something along those lines. And they just let them loose within the solar array, figuring we'll see what happens. And over the course of the month that those animals were out grazing at that site in Louisiana, they damaged only one panel, from what I understand. And that one panel was damaged because one panel out of 10,000 plus solar panels, I should mention. That one panel was damaged because the guy that was managing them was trying to get them off the site. So it happened on the last day, and he had their feed and he was shaking it, trying to get the last couple of cows to come. And they both came running through a small gap next to where some panels were, and one of them bent up the frame of it. Didn't break the whole panel. It just bent the frame holding it. So you might have lost a little bit of efficiency off of that one panel, but you didn't damage, or you didn't break it, kind of thing. So that was an interesting test case. There's folks up in Minnesota who have a solar array that's been in operation for a long time, that they put dairy cows out there where the panels are 6 foot leading edge, and they've reported no damage to it from University of Minnesota. And I think they're currently building another site right now that the leading edges are going to be 4 feet off the ground, and they expect no damage from the dairy cows. So this having cattle within a solar array is very much so a new thing that folks are still figuring out, but I'm still saying it's doable. We just don't have a cookie cutter operation of getting it done yet.
Okay, I think we probably have time for one more question here. I think both of you can maybe take a stab at it, but we can start with you, David. Can you please speak more to soil management and any kind of preservation that needs to be done during the construction phase of a project?
Yes. Excuse me. I had requested that we be peer driven for the post. The company that did mine, they did a nice job, except they didn't even have the equipment to do the peer driven post. So they, augured it out and stuff, and really created a mess. And we're still cleaning up that mess. So the first thought is, if you're a developer and you say you're going to do, the work in this manner, please do that. And the second is, if there's obstacles to that deal, other than renting some equipment, just make it work, but make sure it's cleaned up. So that issue addresses not even the soil health issue, but the landscape sort of issue. And we went in and we've done a lot of work. Our plan for the plants under solar we're going to do some work with compost and raised beds and some different stuff there. So we're not really going in and doing conventional row crop stuff where maybe you plow the ground and then you till it with a cutting har or something like that, but rather pure driven. So it's disturbing only a small spot. So you don't have that compaction that Byron talked about. We're very careful about soil health and compaction, uh, especially for horticultural crops, right? So we'll work around that on my own site, but I'd also suggest that the developers, be really mindful of the compaction issue. Uh, as Byron described a little earlier, where those roots going to go, they're going to go as far as they can till they get hard dirt, right? And then they're going to stop. And is it dirt or is it soil? Well, if you compact it, it's going to be dirt. The difference is soil has living organisms that help plants, that help water retention, all that kind of stuff. So work, what I'd suggest is wherever you're doing your work with a local university on, with extension and a soil scientist to say, okay, how can we treat this? If we're on a farm, how can we treat this with BMP or best management practices, right?
Okay. And Byron, if you have anything you want to add there, feel free to. But our last question here looks like this would be a really cool note to end on. Someone commented and said on your website, it looks like that you donate 2% of the electricity that you produce to low-income residents in the community. Could you speak about how that works?
Yeah, I guess that gets more to how I distribute my electricity versus the agrivoltaic or the agriculture side. But yeah, we're a community solar garden. There's legislation that was passed in 2010 in Colorado around it. I think half the states in the country have community solar garden legislation that allows for people like me to be able to own and operate a solar array. Most utilities really hate it because they want to own all the assets, but I digress. I'm able to sell my electricity or distribute my electricity how I choose. And I have four commercial clients right now that take up about 60% of my power, about 50 residents that take up 25% of my power, a couple local governments that buy 15% of my power, and then 2% of my power I donate to through the Boulder County Housing Authority to some low-income households in Lafayette or in Louisville, which is just about 20 minutes south of me off of the same utility, Excel Energy.
Okay. Well, it's a great note to end on. Appreciate both of y'all's time, Byron and David, and also everybody else that was able to join this webinar. Keep in mind, this is our 5th installment of a 6-part series. So next month, we will be doing a webinar on decommissioning and recycling. So we will have a decommissioning attorney here to speak, along with a manager of a solar panel recycling facility that is there in the southeastern part of the country. Again, appreciate everybody's time and have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Thank you.